Okay, let's dive in. Today, we are undertaking a deep dive into something incredibly ancient, universally relevant, and surprisingly challenging. The profound power and often overlooked danger of your words.
And maybe just as importantly, the power of not speaking. Silence.
Right. Silence.
Yeah, this is a topic humanity has wrestled with for, well, millennia, across pretty much every culture and tradition you can think of.
Mm.
For this deep dive, we've pulled together a really rich collection of sources, insights from ancient philosophers, core religious texts, wisdom from spiritual masters, and thoughts from more recent thinkers and leaders, too.
We're talking everyone from Buddha and Jesus to Benjamin Franklin, the Dalai Lama. It's a wide net.
A really wide net, exactly.
So it's a big lens on this like fundamental human thing. And our mission with all this material is really to distill it down. What are these incredibly diverse voices collectively telling you about the risks of, an uncontrolled tongue?
And the immense, often missed value of silence.
Yeah, and how intentionally choosing our words or choosing not to speak can fundamentally impact our inner peace, our wisdom, our relationships.
Even that deeper spiritual connection some sources talk about.
What are the absolute essential nuggets you need to pull from this huge wealth of knowledge?
Well, I think we have to start with the warnings, because the sources are remarkably consistent and honestly quite stark about the perils of just letting your speech run wild.
Stark how?
Aldous Huxley, for instance, he doesn't mince words at all. He states flat out that unrestrained, indiscriminate talk is morally evil and spiritually dangerous.
Morally evil, spiritually dangerous. Wow. That's intense.
It is. And then you have figures like Jesus saying every idle word will be accounted for.
Oof. That makes you stop and think about every single casual comment, doesn't it? Every little thing you say.
It definitely raises the stakes. Huxley actually gives us categories for this problematic talk. He mentions words driven by malice, uncharitableness, those fueled by greed, sensuality, or self-love. And then there's a category that feels, well, particularly relevant today. Words born of pure imbecility. Just noise, what he calls distracting noise.
Ah, the pure noise category. I think we've probably all contributed to that one at some point, maybe more than we'd like to admit.
Uh-huh.
What other types of negative speech do these sources flag? Is it just malice and noise?
No, the list really expands across traditions. The Dalai Lama warns against divisive talk, harsh speech, and just senseless chatter.
Senseless chatter, yeah.
Thomas à Kempis highlights the dangers of gossip, and so does the Old Testament, actually.
That's what comes up a lot then.
It does. And speaking ill of others is a really common theme. Benjamin Franklin, Muhammad, Sant Kripal Singh, Baba Salwans, and they all echo that caution.
Right.
Buddha adds things like vain talk, boasting, provocative words, basically anything the discipline seeker should try to avoid.
So it's a broad spectrum, not just outright nasty stuff, but also gossip, bragging, even just pointless talk. So what are the consequences they emphasize? I mean, what happens when we ignore these warnings?
Well, the repercussions, they kind of hit on multiple levels. A Kempis, for example, links it directly to injuring your conscience.
Injuring your conscience.
Yeah, and hindering spiritual progress. Buddha offers this really visceral image. In each man's mouth at birth is born an axe, wherewith the fool who speaks ill cuts himself.
Cuts himself with his own words. Wow, that metaphor is really powerful. Sticks with you.
It does, because it speaks to that self-inflicted harm.
Yeah.
And a frequently mentioned consequence is regret. Simple regret.
Oh, definitely. We've all been there.
Ambrose Bierce noted, "Speak when you are angry, and you will make the best speech you will ever regret."
Yeah, that sounds familiar.
And Philippe de Comines adds that classic observation, one never repents of having spoken too little, but often of having spoken too much.
So true. Regret for words spoken seems totally universal. Benjamin Franklin in the Old Testament also suggests uncontrolled talk reveals your folly, right? Like it can lead to ruin.
Yeah, it exposes weakness or maybe just a lack of judgment. And of course, it can devastate relationships.
Also.
Well, Buddha points out angry speech invites harsh answers back.
Right, it escalates.
Exactly. And the Old Testament warns a cutting report just makes the other person even angrier. It fuels the fire.
Makes sense. And beyond the harm to yourself and others, I think you mentioned, a lot of sources point out it's just a massive waste.
Absolutely. A huge waste. A Kempis, Carlyle, Baba Swan Singh, Swami Sivananda, they all highlight the sheer waste of time and energy in excessive or idle talk.
Just draining yourself.
Right. And Epictetus makes this critical point. Talkative people hear nothing. If your mouth is always going, your ears are effectively closed.
So you can't listen, you can't learn.
Precisely. It hinders your ability to take anything in.
Hmm.
And Veluvar, from the Tamil tradition, adds that unguarded words can cause terrible distress to the listener, just awful pain.
Okay, so distress, waste, regret.
Mm-hmm.
But you said there was something even more chilling.
Yes, this is a profound and really repeated warning across these diverse sources. The idea of lasting damage.
Lasting damage.
St. Kirpal Singh and Valuvar both state that the wound from the tongue is deeper and lasts longer than a wound from a sword.
Deeper than a sword wound. Wow.
Valuvar describes it as leaving a scar that never heals.
Oof. A sword cut heals, right? But cruel or careless words can just linger, potentially forever, in someone's memory. That image alone is a pretty compelling reason for caution.
It really is. And St. James sums up the sheer difficulty of managing all this, describing the tongue as a restless evil full of deadly poison which no man can tame.
No man can tame. That sounds pretty bleak.
Which brings us naturally to the counterpoint presented throughout these sources. If the tongue is so hard to tame and so dangerous when it's wild, maybe the answer isn't just in what you say, but in actively cultivating silence.
Silence. Okay. In our world, which is just so noisy, always on, silence can feel like, well, like an absence.
Yeah.
Maybe even awkward sometimes.
Right, but these sources paint it as a profound presence, a positive thing.
How so? Who talks about this?
Well, you've got Agnon, Akempis, St. Francis de Sales, Benjamin Franklin, Publius Syrus, quite a few. They all connect silence and, curbing your speech to paths of perfection and inner peace.
So silence leads to peace and wisdom.
Yeah, it's definitely seen as a sign of wisdom and sound judgment. There's that famous quote, you hear it attributed to Lincoln or Twain sometimes. Better to remain silent and be thought a fool than to speak out and remove all doubt.
Right. Silence at least keeps the possibility open.
Exactly. It preserves the possibility of wisdom. Charles de Gaulle calls silence the prudence of the wise and the sense of fools, meaning the wise choose it deliberately, while it's maybe the accidental state where fools just happen to appear less foolish because they're not talking.
Got it.
Even a simpleton who stays quiet might seem wise, according to the Old Testament. Napoleon Hill notes wise men stay silent when they're in doubt, and Euripides just puts it simply, silence is an answer to a wise man.
So the core nugget here is that silence isn't just emptiness. It's often the space where wisdom actually lives, or at least where it's perceived.
Right. And it's also linked to authority and inner strength. De Gaulle again. Nothing more enhances authority than silence.
Interesting. How does that work?
It suggests the kind of quiet confidence, maybe. And Solzhenitsyn observed that people who kept silent, they bore something powerful within themselves, like an inner resilience or conviction built in that quietness.
And then there's the obvious connection. Silence is absolutely necessary for listening, right? For learning.
The prerequisite, really. Epictetus and Shakespeare humorously note we have 2 ears and 1 tongue for a reason we should hear more than we speak.
Yeah, good point.
Epictetus directly links being talkative to hearing nothing. The internal noise just prevents reception.
Blocks it out.
Yeah. And the Italian proverb reinforces this. From listening comes wisdom. But it's not just about listening to others. Silence is also crucial for inner reflection, for that spiritual connection we mentioned.
How does that work?
St. John of the Cross connects silence and work to collecting your thoughts and strengthening your spirit. He suggests talking dissipates that focus.
Okay. Talking scatters energy.
That's the idea. St. Kirpal Singh explicitly warns that too much talking dissipates spiritual energy. Yogananda has this beautiful phrase he calls silence the altar of the spirit.
The altar of the spirit,
Yeah.
like where the connection happens.
Exactly. And Muhammad even says, the man who finds God loses his speech, pointing to an experience maybe so profound it just transcends words altogether.
Wow.
And finally, these sources suggest silence itself can actually be more eloquent than words sometimes.
How can silence be eloquent?
Hazrat Inayat Khan notes when speech is controlled, the eyes speak. There's the Spanish proverb, don't speak unless you can improve on the silence.
Ooh, I like that one. Improve on the silence.
Right. Emerson envisions speech ultimately ceasing in a nobler silence. And Rufus reminds us, the deepest rivers flow with the least sound. The insight seems to be that the most meaningful things aren't always the loudest.
So the takeaway on silence is really powerful. It's not just the absence of noise. It's framed as this positive practice linked to wisdom, strength, listening, interconnection, maybe even a deeper form of communication.
That sums it up well.
But, as we said, we can't be silent all the time. We live in a world, we interact, we need to speak. So what guidance do these sources give us on when and how to speak mindfully? When? It is time to talk.
Okay, this is where the wisdom gets really practical. There's a core filtering principle, beautifully simple, and you find it in Buddha and Sant Kirpal Singh. It's asking 3 questions before you speak. Is it true? Is it necessary? Is it kind?
True, necessary, kind. Wow. If you actually apply just those 3 filters, that would radically change most conversations, wouldn't it?
It absolutely would. They're powerful because they address intent, content, and the potential impact on the listener.
Right.
Other sources add a bit more to the when. Epictetus advises speaking only when you absolutely must, and then briefly.
Keep it short.
Yeah. Groucho Marx, with his typical wit, said he speaks only when he has something important to say. St. Paul gives a more spiritual angle. Speak only what is good for the current necessity and gives grace to the hearers.
Gives grace, meaning helps them, uplifts them.
Something like that. Lincoln suggests speaking only if you actually hope to produce some good by it. So the collective message seems to be that speech should be purposeful and beneficial, not just noise.
Purposeful and beneficial. Okay. And then how we speak matters just as much, I assume.
It does. Kempe says speak to edify, meaning to build up or improve the listener.
Build them up. Okay.
Oliver Wendell Holmes advises speaking clearly to carve every word, really emphasizing precision. Horace suggests keeping remarks brief so the listener can actually grasp the whole thought and basically respect their time and attention.
Good advice.
Sant Kirpal Singh emphasizes speaking kindly. Voltaire adds that we can always speak obligingly, politely, even if we can't always grant whatever request is being made.
Kindly and obligingly simple manners, really, but framed as profound wisdom here.
It often is, isn't it? And a Sufi proverb adds speaking according to the listener's level of understanding. Tailor your message so it can actually be received.
That requires empathy.
It does. And Manu from ancient India offers this wonderfully nuanced rule: speak what is true and sweet.
True and sweet. Okay, unpack that.
Avoid truth that is not sweet, or sweetness that is false. So it's incredibly challenging, right? It's not just about being honest. It's about delivering truth in a way that can actually be heard without sacrificing the truth just to be pleasant and without being falsely sweet.
True and sweet. That forces a lot of careful thought before opening your mouth. Wow. And the power of positive speech generally, that seems to be a recurring theme.
Definitely. Benjamin Franklin gives very direct advice. Speak ill of no man, but speak all the good you know of everybody.
All the good you know. That's a high bar.
It is. An Arabian proverb encourages us simply to speak a kindness.
Mm-hmm. A kind word is like a spring day, according to a Russian proverb.
Beautiful. And Mother Teresa adds that kind words can be short, but their echoes are endless.
Endless echoes.
Yeah. The takeaway is really clear. Intentional positive speech has immense lasting power.
Right.
And these positive guidelines, they stand in such stark contrast to all that harmful speech we discussed at the beginning. The Old Testament captures this dichotomy perfectly. The tongue of wise men commends knowledge, but the mouths of fools spout folly.
Same instrument, totally different use.
Exactly. Fundamentally different ways, vastly different outcomes.
That last point really highlights something. That speech isn't just a tool we pick up and use. It feels more like an extension of our inner selves. Does that come up?
Oh, absolutely. That connection between external talk and your internal state is a major theme. St. Kirpal Singh states it plainly. It is from the abundance of heart that the tongue speaks.
From the abundance of the heart.
Yeah. Publius Syrus puts it very directly. Speech is a mirror of the soul. As a man speaks, so is he.
A mirror of the soul. Wow. Emerson observed that a man can't utter just a few sentences without showing where he stands in life and thought.
Revealing everything.
Yeah, his background, beliefs, perspective, it all comes out in his language. Art Linkletter makes the link explicit. Undisciplined talk means an undisciplined mind.
So the insight really is that your words betray your internal state, whether you intend them to or not, for better or worse.
Makes sense.
And the Old Testament again provides that contrast. The heart of fools is exposed in their words. The words of wise men reveal their heart.
So what you say shows what's inside, which makes the challenge of self-talk interesting too, doesn't it? Even how we talk about ourselves reveals something.
Definitely. Like La Rochefoucauld's observation, we would rather speak ill of ourselves than not talk about ourselves at all.
Why do you think we do that? Is it ego?
It might speak to that deep human need to be seen, maybe, or just to fill the silence with our own presence, even if it's negative. La Bruyere notes, an egotist will always speak of himself, but a modest man ever shuns making himself the subject of his conversation.
So the tongue naturally wants to turn back to me, unless we actively discipline it.
That seems to be the implication, yeah.
Okay, so given St. James's Pretty stark warning that no man can tame the tongue. How do these diverse sources suggest we actually practice guarding it? It can't just be sheer willpower, can it? That seems exhausting.
No, and they offer various approaches. They acknowledge it's difficult, but also incredibly fruitful work, as Huxley pointed out. A core idea is that guarding the tongue is fundamentally tied to guarding the mind.
Ah, okay. Go upstream.
Exactly. Tackle the root cause. Huxley emphasizes this, and so does the Old Testament. The unruly tongue is seen as a symptom of an unruly mind.
Got it. So how do you guard the mind then?
Well, a Kempis offers simple, direct advice. Watch and pray. St. Kirpal Singh suggests practical steps like thinking twice before speaking, really pausing.
Thinking twice.
Yeah, considering the necessity, the potential effect on others, whether it's genuinely beneficial. And if there's any doubt, just keep quiet. He also adds, mind your own business.
Huh. Practical advice. Mother Teresa apparently highlighted that too.
She did. Simple but effective. St. Kirpal Singh also offers specific spiritual practices like using silent repetition or Simran to help control the mind and therefore the speech, conserving that spiritual energy we talked about.
Using a mantra or something similar?
Yeah, something like that. And he gives this simple, powerful rule for daily life. Guard your eyes, guard your ears, guard your tongue.
Guard the inputs to control the output. That makes a lot of intuitive sense.
It does. Thomas Merton recounts the story of Abbot Agatho, this old desert father who apparently carried a stone in his mouth for 3 years.
A stone? Wow.
To literally train himself in silence. Now, that's extreme, obviously. But it illustrates the level of conscious, often really difficult effort required. Ultimately, St. Kirpal Singh links controlling speech to cultivating purity of heart. It's seen as an outward sign of deeper inner work.
So it reflects something happening inside.
Yeah.
And the sources give us an ultimate, maybe almost unbelievable example of this practice, right? Meher Baba.
Ah, yes, Meher Baba, the Indian mystic. He maintained physical silence for 44 years.
44 years. Communicating only how?
Via an alphabet board or hand gestures.
Incredible. And that wasn't because he couldn't speak.
No, it was a chosen, deliberate spiritual discipline. A profound form of guarding the tongue by, well, rendering it physically silent.
Wow, okay. So bringing all of this together, the dangers of loose talk, the virtue of silence, the principles for mindful speaking, the tongue as a mirror, and these different practices, why does this ancient wisdom matter so deeply to you, listening now, living in our very noisy modern world?
Well, I think because these sources taken together, they argue pretty strongly that controlling your speech isn't just about social politeness or public speaking skills or avoiding foot and mouth moments.
It's deeper than that.
Much deeper. It's presented as absolutely fundamental to cultivating wisdom, achieving inner peace, fostering genuine personal growth, building and maintaining strong relationships.
And for some traditions, spiritual realization itself.
Exactly. And in a world that is just drowning in communication. I mean, social media feeds, endless emails, nonstop news cycles, constant notifications, and yes, even podcasts like this one.
Right. We're adding to it right now.
We are. But this ancient wisdom offers such a powerful counterpoint. It's like a practical guide for navigating all that noise, and maybe more importantly, for improving the quality of your own interactions. It's about moving from just automatic talking to really intentional communication.
Intentional communication. That requires judgment, doesn't it? Like Josh Billings put it, knowing when to talk is often harder than knowing what to say.
That's a great quote for it. Or the French proverb. There should be a reason for speech, but not necessarily for silence. Silence doesn't always need justification.
Winston Churchill captured that balance beautifully, too. Courage is what it takes to stand up and speak. Courage is also what it takes to sit down and listen.
Mm-hmm. So we've looked at warnings from across millennia, practical filters for mindful speech, the quiet power of silence, and this idea that your tongue...
We've seen the devastating, lasting impact of careless words.
And the profound strength found in deliberate restraint.
The sources seem to show that perhaps the most important battles, and maybe the greatest achievements, often happen not through speaking louder or more often, but through that often invisible internal effort. The effort to keep quiet, to listen, and to choose words with immense care when speaking is actually necessary.
It makes you think of Khalil Gibran's story, the man who lost his tongue in battle, and only then came to know the real battle he fought, before that great silence came upon him. Or Rabbi Nachman's idea that the great fault isn't failing to speak well, but learning to speak before ever knowing how to be quiet.
Learning to speak before learning to be quiet, that's provocative.
It is. So the question for you listening might be, what battle must you fight within yourself to cultivate that noble silence, to make your own speech truly intentional? What insights, what connections, maybe what opportunities might you be missing simply by filling the space with noise instead of listening, reflecting, or choosing your words with real wisdom and kindness?